All right, we're continuing in the book of Mark. We're in Mark 14, beginning in verse 32. We are getting into the point of where we have Jesus going into the Garden of Gethsemane. He is going to pray to the Father. The disciples cannot stay awake. And we need to understand too that this is late at night because, and the reason I know this is, well, one, they are sleepy, but regardless of that, while Matthew, Mark, and Luke do not record a whole lot that occurs after Judas leaves, John does. There's a considerable amount of time that had to have taken place after Judas left them in the upper room and at the point where Jesus goes to the Garden of Gethsemane. And Judas knows exactly where he's going because that was a customary place for him to go at night. And Judas knows. That's how Judas is going to be able to betray him and lead these soldiers to get him. And when he says, and lead him away safely, Judas isn't saying, keep Jesus safe. He's not saying that at all. He's to where they can be safe from any crowds. And they don't have to worry about having the swords and the clubs and all that to fend off those that would try to get Jesus away from them. And he's able to get there. Now, so we have Jesus going to the Garden of Gethsemane. He's going to pray to the Father. You have the disciples are going to be falling asleep. They just cannot help themselves. He tells them they need to be praying that they're not brought into temptation. And then we have the betrayal and arrest in the garden. And that's what we're going to be covering this morning. But there are certain parts as we're going through the book of Mark that we want to look at the other Gospels as well. And I've tried to keep that to a minimum so that this isn't a study of the fourfold Gospels, but there are certain parts where we want to look at what the others say as well to get a bigger picture of what occurred. Because while no one contradicts the other, there are details that no one gives except maybe one. All right? If all we had was Matthew, Mark, and Luke, we'd have to ask the question, who is the one that took out the sword and struck the servant of the high priest? We wouldn't know. We would have no idea who it was. But John tells us, and also tells us the name of the servant is Malchus. We can get that information. If all we had was Matthew, Mark, and John, we wouldn't know that an angel visited Jesus at all. But Luke tells us that there is an angel there while he is praying. There is an angel there that comforts him and strengthens him. But put these all together and we get a larger picture. Now, we will start in Mark since that's where we're studying. And with Mark, we're going to see that with each account, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, Matthew and Mark say he goes to Gethsemane. We have Luke saying he goes to the Mount of Olives, and John says he crossed the brook Kidron. All right, are these contradictions? Well, they're not. They're describing the same place. You have the Mount of Olives. I'll try to do this topographically. All right, this is the Temple Mount. The temple is here. And from the outer walls of the temple, perhaps you may remember it from some of the images that we had, that the ground sharply goes down. It's very, very steep and then comes back up. All right, that's the outside of the wall of the temple. It goes very, very steep. That's called the Valley of Kidron. In the bottom of that is the brook Kidron. And the brook Kidron may be considered like a wadi. And what does that mean? That means there are times when it may even be dry. There are times when there's just a little bit of water, and there are times when there'd be a lot of water going through there. They cross that brook. So we can know from this that they're not very far. If they cross that brook, they're not far from the temple at all. And on the other side, and this is another thing, on the other side is the Mount of Olives. You cross the brook, you go up the Mount of Olives. That's facing the temple walls. And there at the Mount of Olives toward the base is the Garden of Gethsemane. So all of these places are describing, every author is describing something about it. That you have the brook of Kidron, you have the Garden of Gethsemane, and you have the Mount of Olives. They're all describing the same place. Now, let's begin and Mark chapter 14 and verse 32. Then they came to a place which was named Gethsemane, and he said to his disciples, "Sit here while I pray." And he took Peter, James, and John with him, and he began to be troubled and deeply distressed. Now, we're going to get more information from Luke on this, of how physically distressed he was, because he is going to be sweating profoundly. And we'll get to that detail when we get to Luke in just a few minutes. Then he said to them, "My soul is exceedingly sorrowful, even to death. Stay here and watch." Now, here in Mark we have his prayer, or the events of his prayer. He went a little further and fell on the ground and prayed that if it were possible, the hour might pass from him. So we don't have a direct quote as to what he says from verse 35. Verse 36, we do. And he said, "Abba, Father, all things are possible for you. Take this cup away from me. Nevertheless, not what I will, but what you will." So he wants it to, if it's possible, take this hour away. Take this cup away. But nevertheless, what you will. It doesn't matter what I will. Then he came and found them sleeping and said to Peter, "Simon, are you sleeping? Could you not watch 1 hour?" Now, there's no need for us to feel like we're so much better than any of these men, that somehow if we were there, we would have been different. They are, as Jesus says, the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. That they're giving away to sleep. They just cannot help themselves. That's precisely what they're doing. And he says, can't you even watch for 1 hour? Watch and pray lest you enter into temptation. The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak. Verse 39. Again he went away and prayed and spoke the same words. What words would that be? From verse 36. He goes and he prays the same prayers, with the same message. The same message. If this can be taken away, let it be done. But not my will, but yours be done. Your will. And when he returned, he found them asleep again, for their eyes were heavy, and they did not know what to answer him. They have no idea. They have no excuse. They've got nothing. You're asleep again. Or I should say, I fell asleep again. I just cannot stay awake. And this would be part of them not really knowing, possibly not really knowing what is truly, truly about to take place minutes from now, minutes from this point, that something is about to happen. They know what he's been saying. They know, they had just heard, and there was a discussion earlier in the evening that one of them was going to betray him, and they were very worried as to who that might be. Is it me? Am I going to be the one to betray you? And they knew what he had said concerning the fact that one of them was going to betray him. He was going to be betrayed to the chief priests or the high priests and the and the scribes. He's going to be delivered to the Gentiles. He's going to be killed. He's going to rise the third day. They've been told that. They don't quite know that now is the time. Now is the time. And they just cannot stay awake. Then he came the third time and said to them, "Are you still sleeping and resting? It is enough." This is verse 41. "The hour has come. Behold, the Son of Man is being betrayed into the hands of sinners." Verse 42. "Rise, let us be going. See, my betrayer is at hand." Here is the reveal. There he is. The one you were worried about, the one you were wondering about, there's the betrayer. My betrayer is at hand. And who's coming? Leading a large group, large band of soldiers is Judas. It would be unmistakable. Now, especially when he says, "See, my betrayer is at hand." But I want us to look at verse 41 when he says, "It is enough. The hour has come." He has been praying fervently to the Father. We know that he has done this 3 times. And as we will find out from Luke, there is an angel that has visited him. But here is this point of okay, have you ever been, and I realize that I don't want to minimize anything here. We don't want to minimize a thing, but it would be a similar sort of situation where you were really concerned about something that's going to take place, and once it's taking place, once you are actually in the midst of it taking place, you didn't have that same worry anymore. That, yeah, this is I don't have any sort of options. That this is the direction it's going. It is now occurring, and I don't have that. I just don't have the same kind of anxiety. I don't have the same kind of worry. Yeah, it's happening, and it's like being carried away by a current. This is a similar thing here. Of he's praying fervently in the garden, and once we see him past this point where the betrayer is at hand, we don't see where he is sweating from this great urgency anymore. That he is now, it's like a current that is taking him at this point. And he does tell Peter and the others that if he wanted to, he could just call the Father, and that would be the end of it. That's all he would have to do. But he's not willing to do it, and he knows that that would be the destruction of everybody. Destruction of everybody. And he is going to show the true love that God has for us. Now, we go back to verse 42. "Rise, let us be going. See, my betrayer is at hand." And immediately, while he was still speaking, Judas, one of the 12, with a great multitude with swords and clubs, came from the chief priests and the scribes and the elders. So here's this large group. And this group is coming to take away one man. But they don't know who might want to take him back. They've been worried about the common people, because the common people see Jesus as a prophet and as a healer from God, if nothing else, someone who is showing miracles from God and healing. Why would you want to rid us of that? But they're coming with swords and clubs, because if they have to, they're going to take him by force. Now, they don't have to. only one person is going to show force, and that is briefly Peter. And Jesus puts an end to that. But verse 44, now his betrayer had given them a signal, saying, so he's given them a signal. He's already talked to them before getting over to Gethsemane. He's given them a signal. He says, whomever I kiss, he is the one, seize him and lead him away safely. And we made mention of this. He's not saying keep him safe. They're coming with swords and clubs. He has heard what Jesus has said. He's going to be betrayed by one of them. He's going to be betrayed by Judas, because they have had this discussion. Is it I? And that's Judas asking that question. And Jesus said, you have said it. And as we discussed maybe 2 weeks ago, that Judas knows Jesus knows. And Judas received the same message, that he's going to be betrayed into the hands of the chief priests and the scribes and the elders. They're going to hand him over to the Gentiles, and he's going to be killed and rise the third day. Judas knows that. Judas knows, and he also knows that he himself, it would be better if Judas Iscariot had never been born. He knows that because Jesus told him that. That the one who's betraying him, it would have been better if he had never been born. That coming from my Creator would be enough for that sends chills down my spine to even think that my Creator would say that about me in something I am thinking about doing. That it would be better that you hadn't even been born. But Judas knows all these things, and he is more concerned about the soldiers being safe than about Jesus being safe. He's making his money. Seize him and lead him away safely, because that's exactly what the plan was supposed to be. The plan was to get Jesus when he's not surrounded by the multitudes. And here he is. This is late in the night in the Garden of Gethsemane, and they're able to get him. Verse 45, and soon as he had come, immediately he went up to him and said to him, Rabbi, Rabbi, and kissed him. Now there are a few more words that are exchanged here, and we'll get that from the other Gospels. But he says, Rabbi, Rabbi, and kissed him. Then they laid their hands on him and took him. Now, we have Peter. What Peter's reaction to all this is going to be. Peter had been very, very fervent, vehement, is what verse 31 says. But he spoke more vehemently. This is Peter. If I have to die with you, I will not deny you. And they all said likewise. He's not the only one that said that. They all said that. But here, Peter takes up one of the swords. They have two swords. Evidently he's got one of them, and he's going to use it. Verse 47, and one of those who stood by drew his sword and struck the servant of the high priest and cut off his ear. So either he comes in a downward stroke, misses his head and just gets his ear, or he's coming with kind of a sideward stroke, and he doesn't have enough power to go any further. He just cuts off his ear that way. I don't know which way. Nevertheless, there are some things that are going to happen here that one would wonder, and this has to do with people's willingness to go against God while they see miracles happening going against God. Because there are several things that occur in all of this where you would think they know better, or they've just been shown better, and you want to kill him. Now, Jesus, Mark's not going to tell us what we're going to find out from another, and that I believe that to be John. Then Jesus answered and said to them, have you come out against robbers with swords and clubs to take me? I was with you in the temple teaching, and you did not seize me, but the scriptures must be fulfilled. He tells them, and we don't know from Mark what, because Mark's not recording it, but it is recorded, what exactly happened to Malchus. But Jesus heals him after saying, permit even this. He heals him. And now he says, why are you coming at me with swords and clubs in the middle of the night out here? I was with you daily in the temple. You could have done it then. You didn't seize me there, but you seized me now. And then he says, but that the scriptures might be fulfilled. That should be enough right there for you to step back and rethink what just happened. Because several things have occurred now. Several things have occurred. One being he just performed a miracle right in front of him, right in front of them all. But the scriptures must be fulfilled. Verse 50, then they all forsook him and fled. And now we have unique information that only Mark gives. Now a certain young man followed him, having a linen cloth thrown around his naked body, and the young men laid hold on him, and he left the linen cloth and fled from them naked. Now verse 50 says, then they all forsook him and fled. Everybody fled, but you have a certain young fellow who's following him, and yeah, you have these young men, these others, these part of the soldiers, they try to lay hold of him, and he's able to escape. They're left with the linen cloth, and he runs away without the linen cloth. And so, strike the shepherd, and the sheep will scatter. That's precisely what he said was going to happen. And it's happened. That's precisely. And everything about this is happening exactly as Jesus stated it was going to happen. And it's not through yet. It's not through yet. But let's go to Matthew chapter 26. And we want to get Matthew's account of this. Matthew chapter 26, beginning in verse 36. Then Jesus came with them to a place called Gethsemane and said to the disciples, sit here while I go and pray over there. Okay. So, verse 37. And he took with him Peter and the two sons of Zebedee, so that's James and John, and he began to be sorrowful and deeply distressed. Then he said to them, my soul is exceedingly sorrowful, even to death. Stay here and watch with me. Verse 39. Here we have his prayer. He went a little further and fell on his face and prayed, saying, O my Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not as I will, but as you will. Verse 40. Then he came to his disciples and found them sleeping and said to Peter, what, could you not watch with me 1 hour? Watch and pray lest you enter into temptation. The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak. Again, a second time he went away and prayed, saying, O my Father, if this cup cannot pass from me unless I drink it, your will be done. Now, verse 43. And he came and found them asleep again, for their eyes were heavy. So he left them, went away again, and prayed the third time, saying the same words. So here is his prayer. This is just slightly different details put in. So get more of a full picture. Then he came to his disciples, verse 45. Then he came to his disciples and said to them, are you still sleeping and resting? Behold, the hour is at hand, and the Son of Man is being betrayed into the hands of sinners. Rise, let us be going. See, my betrayer is at hand. Here comes Judas. And while he was still speaking, behold, Judas, one of the 12, with a great multitude, with swords and clubs, came from the chief priests and elders of the people. Now his betrayer had given them a sign, saying, whomever I kiss, he is the one, seize him. Verse 49, immediately he went up to Jesus and said, greetings, Rabbi, and kissed him. Now, is this different? Yes. Contradictory from Mark? No. You can have Rabbi, Rabbi, greetings, Rabbi. He's greeting him, and he kissed him. But Jesus said to him, "Friend, why have you come?" That too should bring chills down Judas's spine. That should have done it. Friend, why have you come? He knows Jesus knows, and Jesus hasn't done anything to stop it. He has been given the warning. I'm talking about Judas. Judas has been given the warning that it would have been better. He wasn't even born. He has, all these things have been occurring precisely as Jesus said, "Friend, why have you come?" Then they came and laid hands on Jesus and took him. Verse 51. And suddenly one of those who were with Jesus stretched out his hand and drew his sword, struck the servant of the high priest and cut off his ear. But Jesus said to him, "Put your sword in its place, for all who take the sword will perish by the sword. Or do you think that I cannot now pray to my Father, and he will provide me with more than 12 legions of angels?" You think the men with swords and clubs didn't hear what he just said to Peter? Now, this is all being matched up with a miracle that he performs. Matthew isn't telling us what he does, but all this is going together of saying that the Scriptures may be fulfilled. He's saying that. He's saying that he could call the Father, and he could provide more than 12 legions of angels. An angel had been there. All these things would be enough to convince someone, I don't need to be a part of this. This needs, as far as my part, it's done. My part is done. I cannot be party to this anymore. That would be enough. And it's not to say that these men are the most wicked men who ever lived on the earth. We can learn from this that people in any generation can betray Christ. People in any generation can be shown evidence upon evidence upon evidence upon evidence and yet go completely against it. It's a matter of the heart. It's a matter of desire. It's a matter of, it could be a thing of just wanting to please men rather than God, or being more fearful of men than of God. But nevertheless, they continue on. Verse 54, "How then could the Scriptures be fulfilled that it must happen thus? In that hour, Jesus said to the multitudes, 'Have you come out as against a robber with swords and clubs to take me? I sat daily with you, teaching in the temple, and you did not seize me. But all this was done that the Scriptures of the prophets might be fulfilled.'" You are fulfilling them now. You might want to know what Scriptures you're fulfilling. It might be handy if you knew it. Now the next words come, "Then all the disciples forsook him and fled." They strike the shepherd, and the sheep scatter. Now let's go to Luke chapter 22. Luke 22, and we're beginning in verse 39. Luke 22, beginning in verse 39. "Coming out, he went to the Mount of Olives." So Luke's giving a different name. Gethsemane is at the base of the Mount of Olives. That's where the garden is. As he was accustomed, and his disciples also followed him. So this is a place that he would go. All right, and this would be the time of day when he would go there. Verse 40, "When he came to the place, he said to them, 'Pray that you may not enter into temptation.'" Now we have his prayer. "And he was withdrawn from them about a stone's throw, and he knelt down and prayed." So now we know about how far away he went. Not in so many feet, but about a stone's throw. So he's going to be with that outside of earshot, we could say. that one would probably have to be talking very loudly for you to hear anything that Jesus said. And of course, the Peter, James, and John, they're going to fall asleep anyway. But we see how far away he is from them, saying, verse 42, saying, Father, if it is your will, take this cup away from me. Nevertheless, not my will, but yours be done. Now we have unique information that the others don't give. Luke gives. Then an angel appeared to him from heaven and strengthened him. He is receiving help from an angel. But the angel didn't come to stop the crucifixion. He didn't come to stop Judas. That's going to occur because that was under the will of the Father. This was going to happen. And being in agony, notice, he prayed more earnestly. Then his sweat became like great drops of blood falling down to the ground. Notice verse 43 and then 44. An angel came and strengthened him, and he's still in agony. That this truly is a distress, just as he has said in this, that he is almost to death. This has sorrowful and deeply distressed is what he's been saying. And now we see that even with the angel having appeared to him, that he prays more earnestly, and his sweat became like great drops of blood falling down to the ground. Now we're going to look at this briefly two different ways. Is it possible that this is actually a simile? Is it possible that this is a simile? What's a simile? A simile is where you use the word like or as. That his sweat became like great drops of blood falling down to the ground. Well, how was it falling down to the ground? It's as though he were bleeding. It was just that profuse, just that extreme, as though he were bleeding. It was flowing like that. Can we see this as only a simile and that's it? Yeah, I think we can. I think we can do that. Now, I know there are plenty of preachers who will look at the other one that will not look at this as a simile, but this as a literal thing. And I'm not going to make the argument that it's one or the other, because they will make the argument that there is a medical condition where someone can be under so much distress that you have capillaries bursting and one can begin to bleed through their skin. Okay? I'm not going to argue against that. What I am going to say is the language does not allow us to know exactly which way that was. Personally, I take it as a simile. Why shouldn't I? Why shouldn't I? Because that's the way it's written. Now, if one wants to believe the other way, I've got no problem with that. It's just that I don't think that anyone can make the case that's the way it's got to be understood. I don't think that is the case. And Luke is the only one that's going to tell us. But what this does show us is just how much in agony and how much distress he is. He is in extraordinary anguish. And we made mention of this not too long ago, that this actually gives me an understanding and some comfort that if there were things on this earth that could be this troublesome to our Lord, that he is in agony and he is sweating like great drops of blood falling down to the ground, that's not from a lack of faith. That's because he's having to deal with a test. And it is really unhelpful in trying to bring people out of some sort of emotional distress they're going through. To say, like just with bombast, well, life goes on, get over it. It may not be that simple. It may not be that simple. And people can have sleepless nights, and it may not be as simple as to say, you don't have any faith. Because that's to say that Jesus doesn't have any faith. It would also be that of, Paul talked of sleeplessness. That is it from a lack of faith? No. It's because of the agony of the test that one had to go through. The agony of and all the anguish and all the emotions that were just heavy on him. That even our Lord had to pray more earnestly. That's not lessening any other prayer he made. That those weren't valid, but this is valid. Or that they weren't earnest at all, but this is more earnestly because of the desperation that is here. Verse 45, when he rose up from prayer and had come to his disciples, he found them sleeping from sorrow. So this is, they know he's going to be betrayed. They know he's going to die. Now, as I said earlier, they don't know the timeline. They don't know that it's only in a few more minutes. That it's going to be happening pretty quick from where they are. And that they have been in great sorrow in understanding that he is going to die and be betrayed by one of them. Now, verse 46. Then he said to them, why do you sleep? Rise and pray, lest you enter into temptation. And while he was still speaking, behold, a multitude. And he who was called Judas, one of the 12, went before them and drew near to Jesus to kiss him. But Jesus said to him, Judas, are you betraying the Son of Man with a kiss? And we can put all these together. Rabbi, Rabbi, greetings, Rabbi. Friend, what are you here to do? Judas, are you betraying the Son of Man with a kiss? Verse 49. When those around him saw that what was going to happen, they said to him, Lord, shall we strike with the sword? So they ask the question, and before he can answer it, and one of them struck the servant of the high priest and cut off his right ear. But Jesus answered and said, permit even this. And he touched his ear and healed him. Here is just one of the things that occurred in this incident of where here is another proof of who you're trying to kill. Another proof of who it is you're betraying. And he's going to be talking about the scriptures being fulfilled. And verse 52, then Jesus said to the chief priests, captains of the temple, and the elders who had come to him, have you come out as against a robber with swords and clubs? When I was with you daily in the temple, you did not try to seize me, but this is your hour and the power of darkness. Here's another one of those messages. This is your hour. This is your time. This is what you get. And you're not in this alone. And the power of darkness. That if you think that this is that you're in this alone, you're wrong, and you are on the wrong side too. This is your hour and the power of darkness. This is your time to rejoice. This is your time to wag your beards. This is your time to say whatever it is you're going to say and do whatever it is you're going to do. This is your hour and the power of darkness. But Sunday's coming. And things are going to get more complicated for them. Now, let's go to John chapter 18. John chapter 18, and it's just 1 through 11 is what we have for John chapter 18. And we just want to do this so we get a more of a full picture of what occurred in the Garden of Gethsemane. John 18, and beginning in verse 1, when Jesus had spoken these words, he went out with his disciples over the brook Kidron. Once again, it just shows the path he had to take. Where there was a garden, that's the Garden of Gethsemane, which he and his disciples entered. And Judas, who betrayed him, also knew the place, for Jesus often met with his disciples. Okay, met there with his disciples. So Judas knew where to go. Now, in John's account, we have no mention of the prayers. We have no mention of Peter, James, and John falling asleep. We have no mention of that. This is more compressed. Then Judas, verse 3, then Judas, having received a detachment of troops and officers from the chief priests and Pharisees, came there with lanterns, torches, and weapons. So we see that he's received a detachment of troops. Now, Luke just told us that there were chief priests there. Now we see where they've received these from the chief priests and the Pharisees, and they're also there with lanterns, torches, aside from swords and clubs. Now verse 4, Jesus therefore, knowing all things that would come upon him, went forward and said to them, now here's one of those things, whom are you seeking? Now he knows who they're seeking, but he asked them, whom are you seeking? They answered him, Jesus of Nazareth. Jesus said to them, I am he. And Judas, who betrayed him, also stood with them. Now when he said to them, I am he, they drew back and fell to the ground. Why? Why did they do that? This is another one of those barriers that they leaped over. Who are you seeking? Jesus of Nazareth. I am he. They step back and they fall to the ground. They step back and they are almost, it would look like they are worshiping him. Why are they doing that? Why did you come with clubs and swords and a betrayer if you're going to do that? It would appear that inside their own heart, their souls, inside them, they knew this was the Christ, the Son of the living God. They knew who this was. I am he, and they immediately go down. I am he. And I don't believe this was done by way of some miraculous way. I think they just did it on their own. They did it. Then he asked them again, whom are you seeking? And they said, Jesus of Nazareth. He answered, I have told you that I am he. Therefore, if you seek me, let these go their way. If you seek me, you have need for, you don't have any need at all for these others. Let them go, that the saying might be fulfilled which he spoke, of those whom you gave me I have lost none. Now, verse 10, we see who drew the sword. Nobody else says it, but John does. Then Simon Peter, having a sword, drew it and struck the high priest's servant and cut off his right ear. The servant's name was Malchus. That's unique information that's given. So Jesus said to Peter, put your sword into the sheath. Shall I not drink the cup which my Father has given me? This too is unique information given in all of this. Now, we have given a more rounded understanding of what occurred that night. Where they went exactly, the events as they occurred, and the fact that he was there for a while. He prays 3 times, and there is an angel that comes and comforts him, and that he goes back twice to find that the disciples have fallen asleep again. Peter, James, and John, they have nothing they can answer him by. And then comes the time when he says, okay, it's time. See, my betrayer's at hand. And here comes Judas with a detachment that has been given to him from the chief priests and the Pharisees and the scribes. And then they're going to take him, and the trial is going to begin. And now in 2 weeks, we're going to look at the trial. I cannot go into every detail about how everybody broke the law to put him on the cross, and how many laws were broken to do it. Because the Sadducees are going to break their own law, the Sanhedrin court. Sadducees would be part of that. But the Sanhedrin court is going to be, they're going to go against their own law of how a criminal is tried. So will the the high priest. Also, Pilate is going to be breaking Roman law, because he knows he's got an innocent man. He knows he does. But he's not going to judge him as innocent and just let him go. And there's numerous things that are going to occur that are against the legal codes of both the Sanhedrin, the Jewish court, and the Roman court. And they're going to break them for the sake of having the Christ crucified and killing him. And I want to thank everybody being with us this morning, and we will continue again. Thank you.